Greetings, Corpse Clubbers, and welcome back to a brand new episode of Corpse Club, the official podcast for dailydead.com. My name is Heather Wixson, and if you've been following along all this month, you know that we have been celebrating Indie Horror Month on Daily Dead and over here at Corpse Club as well. And I am thrilled to be joined for our very final Indie Horror Month 2022 episode by none other than Jim Cummings, who made one of my very favorite modern werewolf movies of the last few years. And I'm just, again, Jim, I know you're such a force of nature in sort of the world of independent cinema. So as I told you before we started recording, you were the person I wanted to wrap up the month with. So I really, really do appreciate this.
Oh, I'm honored. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. So we were just talking about sort of like the trials and tribulations of independent filmmaking. And one of the things that that's one of the reasons I wanted to bring back Indie Horror Month last year is one, I realized, as we got into the pandemic in 2020 and studios kind of they just stopped everything. Like movies weren't coming out.
Yeah.
Promotion wasn't happening. We actually got to see a bunch of independent movies getting a chance to make some noise. And I thought, gosh, we need to keep that momentum going because I know we're going to get back to studio stuff. I know we're going to get back to the stuff that everybody's going to want to promote and things like that. But these films still need a platform. They still need to be, celebrated. And it's just been such an interesting process for me over the last few years, just kind of seeing how everything has changed in the wake of the pandemic. And I'm curious for you, has it been better or been worse? Because you had Wolf of Snow Hollow, which was sort of, while we're in the thick of the pandemic, but then you've also had the beta test. And I'm curious, what has this, the last 2 years been sort of like for you from the filmmaking standpoint in terms of getting your movies out there, getting people to connect with them and things like that?
Yeah. Thank you. It's been really just confirmation for me for stuff that I already knew, that there is a hole in the marketplace of well-crafted movies and unsanitized movies. The pandemic, moved everything ahead 10 years, basically. The studio system didn't really know what to do. They can only make movies with a lot of people, which is dangerous at the time. But then it really allowed independent horror films to shine, where, if there are no big movies that are coming out on iTunes, Wolf of Snow Hollow ends up on the front page right next to Scare Me or Werewolves Within, or any of these other movies that are made by independent filmmakers. All My Friends Hate Me, things like that, where otherwise it might not have gotten a spotlight on it, but because of the pandemic and the drought of content that was coming out, finally the spotlight lands on some talented people. But no, I think another thing that it confirmed was that there is this political generational shift towards sanitized filmmaking, and you can make something in a single location with your friends in 10 days that can directly compete alongside James Bond or whatever, I think really because Hollywood is always late to the game and doesn't really know how to make stuff the way that most independent horror filmmakers know how to make stuff, you're going to eat their lunch every day. So for us, we were very lucky. Our movie was supposed to come out in March of 2020, and then South by Southwest got canceled, and the studio said, let's push it till October. Or let's just push it. We didn't know when it was going to come out. And then they found a way to release it digitally, and it came out, and it was the #1 movie on iTunes for that week, which is impossible to think about. That never happens for an indie film. And so it was we were very, very, very lucky and fortunate. And grateful. But then with the beta test, I had already shot it. I'd shot it before the pandemic. We shot it for nothing. We ran a WeFunder campaign to raise the funds through crowd equity from kind strangers on the internet. And then I edited it for 16 months by myself without needing a lot of the infrastructure of Hollywood, like post sound or visual effects or stuff like that. We did the whole thing kind of freelance from my garage, and it worked out. And so we were able to release 2 movies during the pandemic. and it worked out great for us.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because I remember like there was this movie that was called The Wretched that came out. I think it was like summer of 2020, but because everybody had been like re-releasing movies. So like Star Wars was back out like at all the drive-ins and like Karate Kid and things like that. But I remember seeing like one week in particular, The Wretched like beat Star Wars.
That's right.
And I was like, holy shit, this is so cool. Like this tiny little like horror movie about like, you know, an evil witch entity that, you know, comes and tries to consume children or something like that, you know, beat out Star Wars. Yeah. And that kind of blew my mind. And it made me realize like, you know, if people like gave the indies the proper resources and, you know, kind of gave them the space to sort of be able to make some noise, like I feel like people would embrace, you know, the non-studio side of filmmaking, you know, a little bit more, because I mean, we clearly needed it then. We still need it now.
I think another thing that I have to remind myself is that the Borat sequel was an indie film. It was sold on auction, basically. But they made that with true independent spirit and, you know, with gumption and, you know, they exposed themselves to COVID. It was a very risky production to do. And stupid, but that was one of the biggest movies in the world that came out because it was unsanitized, because it was purposely going against the grain and making something that made the audience go, oh my God, I can't believe they did that. And that feeling is the thing that travels. Like, you know, Jackass 4 being the huge success that it is not by accident. It is like, it is showing people what they can't see on TV. And I think now is the time to do that. Like, when you're going through the corporate slog of note-taking and development, it's just cutting all the edges off of the movie where you can't curse, you can't show sex, you can't show real violence. And that's not what audiences go to the cinema for. Audiences are perverts, to quote David Fincher. And I think really like, if you can do that on a small budget, you can win the audience that big studio is ignoring or insulting with their movies. So I think it's never been easier or a better time to make something that's rock and roll that is that stands out from the tripe we're seeing right now.
Yeah, and as somebody who like literally just saw Morbius this weekend at a drive-in, and I don't mean to pick on Morbius, but because everybody else has, but
please do.
What a non-movie that really was. We finished it. We were like, I don't even know what that was about. Like there was no consequence, like no stakes, nothing to that movie. But we finished it with the Nick Cage movie. And that was a really fun time. So I was like, okay, if nothing else, at least we got that out of this.
I think another thing to note about that with big movies like that, they're sometimes noted to death. So sometimes it's not the filmmaker's fault, and they're often required to sign contracts that says that they won't say anything about their experience of making the movie. So like what's happening is, although you're seeing a directed by, credit in the credit or produced by or whatever, a lot of times they have absolutely no say. And it's people who have never edited a YouTube video before that are coming from the advertising world that are giving notes that you have to listen to and pulling at the threads of the sweater. So like, I try not to insult movies. I never give negative reviews. I only talk about the good stuff that I like, but that's just the nature of Hollywood. Everything that we know about Hollywood filmmaking is true. And you can make something in your bedroom with your friends that'll be cooler for audiences. I don't know. I think it's a no-brainer to make movies that are outside of the studio system. You'll do better.
Yeah. And honestly, I'm very much like you, where like, if I see something and I'm just like, oh, this is not for me, chances are I'm not going to take the time to review it. And maybe that's why everybody like harps on me a little bit, because I only write positive reviews. But honestly, I'd rather just talk about movies that I genuinely enjoy and I really want people to go out and see, rather than crap all over somebody else's hard work, because I know it is. And I don't blame the director at all. Like, it's just certain things didn't come together, and that's fine. I mean, I still got to see some crazy vampire stuff. That was kind of interesting, but it's tough. And honestly, like, there's so many people out there who just like, are so reactionary, because that's kind of what the cool thing is to be on social media. where I'm just like, no, I'm just going to talk about the stuff I really love.
Outrage. Yeah. And like just to waste any time talking about a shitty movie that came out in 2020 and not spend time talking about how good Corpus Christi or Parasite is just like, it's just a waste of time. And I don't know. I think that kind of like dunking on movies that are obviously bad, if you know anything about power dynamics or like seen any Adam Curtis documentary, which I've been thinking about a lot lately, is like it makes the person in the comment section feel better or more powerful than the filmmaker, when obviously they're not. But it feels better. And I was in that position for, 20 years. I was watching movies that, and I would go out to a diner afterwards and talk shit about them. And it made me feel like I was smarter than the filmmaker, even though I had never made a movie before. I never made a YouTube video before. But I just see that as like a waste of time. And it's so tempting for me to watch something and then go, oh, that was so boring, and like to talk about it. And instead I look up what great movies are out. I'll look up Rotten Tomatoes and say, okay, is there anything good coming out of Iran today? I'm going to watch something like that. I don't know. I feel like we end up distracting ourselves from actually focusing on the important stuff, which is making movies and carrying the torch and proving that independent cinema is still alive. Everything else is selfishness and self-congratulation, I guess.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, what is interesting to me is, you mentioned, going through sort of crowdsourcing for filmmaking. And I'm curious for you, because I know, this is something you also did for Thunder Road back in the day.
Yeah. Did
you find like being able to kind of do that in terms of like, not having to go and, do sort of the typical fundraising where, you're kind of trying to appease a bunch of sort of money people, and just being able to take this to real movie fans and real people who really care about,
perverts.
Being involved. Yeah, perverts, as David Fincher would say. Did you like, was that sort of freeing in a way? Like,
oh, it's great. Oh, forget it. It's amazing, Heather. It's like to post something on the internet now and say, hey, I want to make this movie. I can't tell you anything about it, but it's going to be a masterpiece. And to have people trust you because of the movies that you made before is the best feeling in the world. And also, when we're in other meetings with actual Hollywood outlets, like platforms and studios, our experience doing the crowdfunding thing is a viable threat, where it's like, oh, well, if we say no, he's still going to make the thing. He's still going to go out and do the movie. And if we're cited as saying no, then we're the people that passed up on this thing that's blowing up right now. I think nobody wants to be in that position. And really, my raison d'etre is to give back and send the ladder back down, and everything I talk about on Twitter. And like when I was a kid, I saw Krisha at South by Southwest, Trey Schultz's first movie, arguably his second. And I was blown away by it. And I said, I'm going to come in and I'm going to bring you guys a Skywalker, and I'll pay for it. And, I'll be an associate producer or whatever you guys want to give me. But I used that as like grad school, as like film school. I learned so much just from watching Trey work. And now I do the exact same thing to 50 people. Anybody that wants to come on set, if you want to help finance the movie, it's the cheapest possible film school you could ever go to. And it's my favorite thing to do. It's like I'm an open book. Nobody's distracting. They can ask whatever questions they want. Everybody gets invited to the Video Village. And it is a much more cohesive and fulfilling experience for every single person on the set than it ever could be having a client there or having studio think about, that joke's a little racy. Maybe we cut it. Or can we have this person's wardrobe be a little bit more aspirational, or any of the other nonsense that you're seeing happening at the big scale. I'd much prefer to do it with friends and family and supporters of cinema on the internet. It has been eye-opening and life-changing for me, and I hope everybody does it.
That's awesome. I wanted to ask too, because because I know that there's a lot of aspiring filmmakers out there, and I get to interact with a handful of them on Twitter and things like that. And, I know sometimes they listen to our show and everything like that, but I'm curious, when you set out to do Thunder Road, because that was kind of like sort of your it became like your moment. Previous to that, like you'd done a ton of short films and things like that. Like how challenging was it for you to get out there with that first project to like get people to pay attention?
I was an employee. I worked in an office when I did the Thunder Road short film. People made fun of me for growing my mustache out. They said I looked like a
Oh
porn
no.
star, and I just took it every day on the chin. And I go into meetings, people make fun of me, and then I shot the thing, and it was 6 hours. We shot it in a funeral home, and then it won Sundance. And I was a nobody. I had been a producer for many years. I knew what good movies looked like, but I had no business being an actor. I never gone to acting school. I still haven't. I haven't
Wait,
taken an acting
really?
class. Absolutely. I was a producer for 6 years. I was a line producer doing budgeting and scheduling. I had no business being a filmmaker, but I loved movies. And then we won Sundance. I went around Hollywood and met a bunch of people. I'm a very nice guy, so I went in and talked to 75 different people, different companies, and tried to talk about how we could make something bigger and do a feature maybe. And they all wanted Jake Gyllenhaal or someone else, and I don't really know anybody. And so I just thought, okay, well, what's the actual budget of this feature? And my producer Natalie said it'd be 200 grand. We ran a Kickstarter campaign, raised 36, and then we gap financed it from strangers on the internet. And that was my first real toe dipping in how to make movies a career. And then we made the Thunder Road feature, and it blew up. And part of that narrative of us doing it from the grassroots was, one of the reasons I think people wanted to support us. We were the underdogs, and the movie's quite good too. We're very lucky. But yeah, I had no background in doing any of this stuff. It took us kind of stumbling ass backwards into doing it, that we found out that it was possible.
That is amazing. And then, the feature of Thunder Road, like, because you guys won like the some big awards at South by that year.
Yeah, we won
Holy
Deauville,
crap.
Seattle, Milan, 1,000 different insane. Yeah, we had no business going around the world with the film and winning everything, and we did. But then that was a big confirmation for me. It didn't make us rich at all, but it was something that was like, okay, cool. People want to see well-crafted movies. I'm just going to focus on that. I need to learn everything. I need to watch IMDb's top 250 movies of all time. I need to find out these camera tricks. I'm still doing that. I'm still in this mode of, huge feelings of inadequacy and wanting to impress and not give up, and to make sure that the people who bet on me as an audience say, oh, we like this guy's movies, that I'm not letting them down. And I don't know. I feel like it's a weird place to be. I'm going into my fourth feature. I don't know what it's going to be yet, but I have a couple options. And I don't know. I feel like now I just want to make something that is still impressive. It's still this kind of boyhood, childhood playground thing of I have to make something that makes people laugh, class clown kind of thing.
That's awesome. And I'll tell you this, because when I do festivals, usually I have to sort of focus on the genre stuff. But I remember in 2018, there was because all the film people, because we kind of go in differently to certain screenings than other folks, because we have to be there to review them and stuff like that.
Right.
And everybody it was 3 or 4 screenings in a row, and everybody was talking about Thunder Road. And I was like, hey, wow, what is this movie? So I don't get a chance very often to get to see stuff outside the genre, but I did. And I was like, okay, everybody's talking about this. I need to make some time. And I totally fell in love with it.
Thank you.
And again, it's one of those unfortunately for me, because I cover genre, I'm like, well, I can't really write about it, but but I'm going to keep an eye out for this guy. And then you came along with Wolf of Snow Hollow. I was like, okay, great.
Finally.
Now I can do some stuff.
Yeah, it's basically Thunder Road with a werewolf. That is kind of how we picked it for the studio.
I was going to say, you have quite the knack for playing stressed out cops.
Yeah.
Who are kind of dealing with a lot.
Daughter. Yeah. Death of a parent, all that shit. Terrible.
Well, I'm curious, that transition from, Thunder Road and then going into something like Wolf of Snow Hollow, as you said, the filmmaking is a learning process. I still feel even writing about movies, I'm still constantly learning about different things. You know what I mean? I've been doing this for 15 years. I still feel like I'm always learning something.
Yep.
Did you, going into that, did you feel more prepared than you were for Thunder Road? Or were you just okay, well, now we're doing something completely different in terms of it's a little bit bigger, you've got creature, stuff going on, some pretty crazy effects and things like that, you know, a little bit bigger of a cast. And like, I'm just curious, like how was that sort of transition from Thunder Road to Snow Hollow for you?
Oh, it's a nightmare. It's well, also because I'm going into the horror space, which is a very unique genre to go into, especially a werewolf movie. That, you know, there's a huge tradition behind it where people have a lot of opinions about what is supposed to be done in that space.
Wait, horror fans have opinions? No, I don't believe it.
But I was very much a guest in that space. Like I was not, you know, I didn't come up in horror. I wasn't Ty West or, you know, Ari Aster or anything. I was this comedian kind of guy. And I had this idea for a cool, like, Zodiac as a comedy werewolf movie. And I did it as a podcast. I like recorded it privately like this, like we're talking through microphones, and then put in music and sound design, recorded the script, and it was working. And I kept on adding to the podcast and making it funnier or scarier in some moments. And that's how I knew that the tone would work in a feature film. And very quickly after we won South by Southwest and got into Cannes, we had a couple of people. There was some kismet and some kind of momentum behind my werewolf script, even though I had written it before Thunder Road. I mean, really, it happened very quickly where we got greenlit, and then it was like, okay, cool. By next March, which was only about 5 months away, you're going to be shooting this movie. And, you know, you have the fear of the sophomore slump of like, oh, you know, Thunder Road was a fluke and this guy doesn't know what he's doing. You know, this guy's a phony. All that kind of fear that you have from grade school carries on with you. And actually, Variety, Peter DeBruge said as much in his review. Bless him. He said like, oh yeah, this is clarification and like, you know, certainty that Thunder Road was an accident, and Jim actually has no talent. And then, you know, within the year, he's reaching out to get a screener for the beta test. But
do I need to like throw hands with Peter DeBruge? Because I will.
No, bless his heart. He watches a lot of films. But no, it was funny where like that stuff happens. You're constantly terrified of, you know, people are going to make fun of you on the internet, and then you're on set and you have 1,000 other things to worry about, of like the sun's going down and you have 5 more shots to get and you're only going to get 2. And it's like, okay, well then which ones do we need to get? So there's 1,000 different problems, more about the practicals of production than anything else. I knew it was going to be a good movie. And I knew that it was going to work if the fans followed through until the last 10 minutes of the movie, which I'm very proud of. And yeah. It ended up working out. The bait and switch, no spoilers. The reveal works pretty well, and it feels like Hitchcock. And I'm very happy with it. But still, it was terrifying. You know, you're making something and hoping people will appreciate it, and you never know. And it was my first studio movie as well. I wanted to make them happy, and while also making the fans happy. It was a tricky do-si-do, tricky tango.
Yeah, well, I would say like, because when I got to see it. For the second time, it was through the Beyond Fest drive-in screening. And I love that you paired it with The Burbs, because I'll tell you, as a kid, I watched The Burbs, and it kind of like, I think because I wasn't quite ready for that tone. It didn't click with me the way that it clicks with me now as an adult, where we watch this movie like several times a year. Yeah. We have Burbs posters up in our house even.
It's one of the best movies of all time.
It really is. And I'm like,
top 10.
And I feel like such an idiot where I'm like, I want to go back to tell like, you know, 12-year-old me, like, why, what is wrong with you? How do you not see the genius of this movie?
So I watched a bunch at that age too. We had it on VHS and I would watch it all the time. And I didn't really know anything about movies. And like really, since we had so few VHSs, that was what a movie was to me. It was like that and The Matrix. And I was like, oh, these are movies. But the fusion of comedy and horror and drama and detective stuff in that is so compelling. And Joe Dante's actually become a bit of a buddy, so much so I've talked to him on a couple of podcasts and in person, but he said on a podcast recently, he was like, if anybody's going to do The Burbs, Jim Cummings should do it. That guy could remake that movie. It was like an honor to hear. Can you fucking imagine Joe Dante saying that? My childhood hero. Anyway, but no, that fusion of comedy and genre fluidity is the reason why all of our movies feel like there's 10 movies in one of them.
Okay, because now all I'm focused on right now is you remaking The Burbs. So do we just call Universal? Is that how that works?
I think that's how you have to do it. I actually have been like fantasizing about it. I've been like thinking about how I'd actually do it since he said it. And I'm like, oh, it could be interesting. But but I don't know. I think that's the thing. Like at this point, there's so many reboots and remakes and stuff. It would have to be something completely different that would be an homage. I just got a T-shirt made. I went through Redbubble and had a sweatshirt and a T-shirt made that said "Just watch the original." I've been watching a bunch of movies lately that are reboots and remakes, and it's like, why did I watch this? I think it was just because I love the original. Well, maybe I'll just watch the original. Anyway.
Yeah, no, I get it. But also at the same time, there are some remakes that are all timers too. Like if you go back and watch like The Fly or The Thing or.
Oh, I mean, and then like, I'm wrong a lot. If you look at Back to the Future 2 is arguably a better movie. It's like, and certainly a cooler one. It's there's 1,000 different reasons why that sentence doesn't work. But for the most part,
it does work.
Like it does. It
Yeah.
does. It does. Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. I for me, like, because I rewatched both Thunder Road and Wolf of Snow Hollow yesterday back to back.
Oh my God.
I did. Yeah, it was a really good Sunday. And I have to ask, because I know we talked about him a little bit when we did the interview for Snow Hollow back in 2020, but I know that you were completely surprised when Robert Forster agreed to be a part of this, but I'm curious now, like, honestly, like it's, to me, like, I'm just so glad this was sort of, I mean, I wish he was still here, but I look at that performance now in such a different light.
It's so sad. Yeah,
it is, but it's beautiful in a way. Like you could, it's like you could almost tell, like he knew. Like,
oh, he knew. No, he did know, and he didn't tell us. He
didn't.
No, I'm kidding. He was the best in the world. He was everybody's grandfather. Okay. He was like the mascot on set. Everybody loved him, and there was like a fight to sit next to him at every lunch just to ask a bunch of questions and listen to him talk. He was very much my father on set, and was so down to do everything. He had written and directed and acted in a film before in the 80s or 90s, in the early 90s. And he was like, I'll never do it again. He was like, I don't know how you do it, kid. I don't know how you do it. But he was like so grateful to be a part of the movie and understood all of the humor and the pathos and the sadness. Like there's a scene in Wolf of Snow Hollow where he's trying to plant an article in the newspaper to makes the police department look good. And it's this one long shot of us kind of arguing with this newspaper journalist and a photographer. And the joke is that he keeps on walking back because he's triggered and like going to beat up this journalist. And I have to keep pulling him back. And we kept on arguing on set of like whether, like how much farther can we go? Can he swing at it? Like he was such like so down. He understood everything about the movie, where the audience was going to be on the roller coaster. And that's so rare. And that's what happens when you're acting in movies for, 50 years. But he, I guess, did know that he was dying. And I guess when we were on set, there's like argument. Nobody knew that he was sick until after he passed. He didn't want anybody to know. But there are things that you look back on and you're like, oh yeah, no, that makes sense. He must have known. There were times when I was talking about my dad who just cannot retire. He's 85. And I told him a story about he was a lawyer and then immediately went in to become a docent at a museum. And we're kind of making fun of him because he can't stop. And he looked at me angrily and he goes, yeah, why quit? All right, are we going to shoot this thing or what? And then like moved on. He was such an incredible guy. I didn't think he would do it, to be honest. I didn't, I'd seen him in Jackie Brown and 1,000 other movies, Alligator. And I was like, I don't know if he even would want to do it. But our producer, Matt Miller, had worked with him on a film called Too Late and had nothing but great things to say about him. And I was like, he's going to say no. I'm just going to send the script to his manager. And the movie's about a guy who is dying, the sheriff of the police department who's dying, can't tell anybody about it, and has to kind of like bully his son around and all the, death be not proud stuff that felt very manly and cowboyish. And he called me and said, I got it entirely. He goes, and he saw Thunder Road as well. And he was like, yeah, I could do it. Let's do it. I'm free in 3 weeks. Is that good? And I was like, yep, that's when we're shooting. That's perfect. So we blocked him out for 5 days, I want to say. And he hung out with us in Utah. And it was a dream. I cannot say nicer things about the guy.
That's amazing. I mean, it's interesting too, because we just got that the Alligator Blu-ray finally came out here a few months ago. And that thing is like such a gift.
Yeah.
Because that was a movie like I remember watching as a kid, like somebody taped it off a cable. And so we had like it secondhand on a VHS tape. and then I could just never find it. And then to get it now, it was just
in full HD, and a handsome young man, Robert Forster, with a pistol. It's great fun. Yeah,
I know. And it's funny to like see him like making fun of his like, you know, impending bald spot then, you know, and this was like 40 something years ago. So yeah, no, I for you though, like if Robert hadn't said yes, do you feel like the movie would have been different? Because I just feel like there's something that he really added to that. There's like a softness.
Yeah, he was so okay with seeming pathetic. There's that scene of me, and I go in, and he says, "Close that door." And I close the door. It's kind of this private conversation. This is before you realize that I'm his son, that it's my dad, and it's all of this kind of like political theater of having to keep this facade up that I'm doing okay and there's strength in the police department, all that stuff. And it's like nobody cares if you work from home, Dad. Like this is just all bullshit that it only makes you feel good. It makes me nervous that you're like having to drive here every day. And it was just so endearing. And he really did feel that way. He has this monologue where he talks about this bank robbery, and we just let him go. And he got every syllable, like all of the cadence, all of the lived in expressions. He felt so genuine. And it's so wonderful to watch. You feel like you get to hang out with the guy and listen to his stories. It feels very paternal, of like, you feel like it's kind of everybody's dad a bit. I really do feel like he added this real character to the performance that it wouldn't have worked, I don't think, if we had anybody else. I don't know if we would have been able to make the movie.
Yeah, no, it's again, it's one of those like rewatching it, and because we watched it last December too, just because like it's like nice to have like a little bit of a holiday backdrop to a horror movie, you know, where it's not explicitly about Christmas.
Yeah.
So I don't feel like we get enough of those. We're like, Christmas is sort of in the backdrop, but it's not like Black Christmas, you know, it's, you know, it's like its own thing. So it was one of those, we were like, we need to find some more movies we can watch during December. And I was like, I think Wolf of Snow Hollow fits. And of course,
it's
and then
great.
That beautiful finale where
with
you got
Lang
the Christmas
Syne.
music.
It's
oh
great.
My God.
Yeah. From the very beginning, I knew I wanted to use that song because it builds up so wonderfully. And it's like, I've never seen somebody get their face shot off with this song. It would just be so insane. And also it's like at that moment, there's such a catharsis of like, this guy has been trying to do this the whole movie and nobody's listened to him. And then you build up the music with Old Lang Syne and he finally gets to do the thing. And then at the end of it, you're like, oh no, this guy's a murderer. This guy should have done due process and like just arrested the guy. And instead he does what the victim's boyfriend tells him to do, shoot him until you can see the ground through his face. And it's just like, it's so like, I think there's nobody in the audience that doesn't think like, yeah, that was a good move. But as soon as you think about it broadly, you're like, oh no, this guy should be in prison. Like that's not the American justice system doing right, you know? Anyway, I love so much. That ending is one of my favorite things we've done. It's so fulfilling to watch. Will Madden, the guy that plays Paul Carnery, is a good friend of mine. He's 5 years younger than me, and he's one of the best actors I know. And yeah, we were very lucky to work with that dude.
That's amazing. And it's funny too, because like, I think like a day or two later, like I watched like It's a Wonderful Life. And of course that's a movie that also ends with Old Lang Syne. And it's such a different effect where I was like, oh, wow. Yeah. I was like, could you do a Wolf of Snow Hollow? It's a Wonderful Life double feature.
The Apartment has it too. There's a couple of New Year's Eve. There's one big New Year's Eve scene in The Apartment, the Jack Lemmon, Shirley MacLaine movie. And it's all of them cheering in a bar and then she leaves. There's a couple of good uses of that song in different, some of my favorite movies.
Yeah, no, I love that kind of stuff. Like that to me is just like, oh yes. I mean, I'm a holiday person as it is. So anytime we can get a little bit of an infusion of the holidays into stuff, I'm very much a fan of that. I was already 2.5 stars in when I realized it was like Christmas. So, you know, the rest of the stars were just gravy after that with my review.
Well, thank you for all of them. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I wanted to ask, because like, so I know you, like, you know, we also chatted when the beta test came out. Now, when did you do the beta test versus like when you were in production on Snow Hollow then?
So yeah, there was overlap in pickup shots for Wolf of Snow Hollow. We were editing Wolf of Snow Hollow at the Vanishing Angle offices in Atwater in it was like a loft office that I was in. And then Matt Miller built this kind of like screening room editing suite underneath. And so our two editors were in there, and PJ and I were upstairs writing and doing kind of like campaign prep for beta. And then we ran the campaign and we raised the money in 12 days or something like that, like no time at all. And then it was like, oh no, now we should start doing the movie. We should start prepping this movie. So like there was overlap by, a couple of weeks or something like that between prep for beta and, post finishing for Wolf of Snow Hollow. But really it felt natural. It was like, we got to keep the team afloat. We got to keep making movies. So we delivered Wolf of Snow Hollow in October of 2019, and we shot beta for 3 weeks in November, and then 1 weekend in December of 2019. We made it just under COVID lockdowns, and then I edited it for 17 months after we shot.
Oh, wow. I'm curious too, because, Beta Test was also, a collaboration with PJ. As well. Was that just a chance to sort of change things up for yourself? Like, because he's great in the movie. Two, I like your dynamic in terms of what you guys were able to achieve with that movie as storytellers.
Yeah.
But was that just something just kind of like, hey, do you want to make this movie with me? Or?
Yeah. So PJ and I have been doing like TV writing. We'd been developing a TV show about astronauts that was really funny. And then I called him once in like 2018 and I said the bit of like, what would you do if you got a letter in the mail that invited you to a no strings attached sexual encounter with an admirer? Would you go? And he was like, absolutely not. My wife would kill me. And then we ended up talking about it for like an hour on the phone. And he was like, let's keep talking about this. This is interesting. And then we spent a year talking about it. And it was just us breaking down what the movie would be and all the fun stuff that we could do about lying and cheating in Hollywood. And it was just becoming more cohesive and more cohesive and more cohesive. And we had this like Google Doc that was 20 pages. And I was like, let's just write it. Let's just, go away and write it. We took out an Airbnb in Venice Beach and we went and wrote it in, 3 days. That was the first draft. It was only 50 pages. And then we kept on adding to it and polishing and editing and polishing. And that became the functional shooting script. But no, really from the very beginning, I knew that it was going to be with PJ. And just by writing it out loud, we were already directing it. Like the way that we screenwrite is never in screenplay format. It's us having 1,000 conversations and talking out every scene and what you can do, and then kind of doing a treatment and then writing it in screenplay format. But very much so, the film is directed before we write it. And then we do a podcast of it. So it's even more directed. So PJ and I were kind of already co-writing and co-directing the thing. And I have no ego. I was like, let's do it together. PJ's never directed a short film. He jumped directly into features.
Wow.
As a director, and it worked out.
Yeah. I'm curious too, because you talk about like, sort of mapping everything out like through podcasts and things like that. Like, that isn't typically, like when I talk to directors, that isn't typically something that a lot of people do. Do you feel like that helps you?
I had never met anybody that did it. Yeah. Like and then I started doing it, and I did it for Thunder Road, and I did it for this kids adventure movie that I wrote, because nothing was happening to it. It was just a PDF on my desktop. And I was like, all right, why don't I just start making the movie? Why don't I do it in audio format? I can afford that. I have a microphone and a laptop and a closet I can record it in, and I'll put in some music and sound design and see if it'll work. And then that became part of the writing process as well, where you're recording it. And you're like, this scene sucks. These two scenes suck. How do I make these two scenes faster and make it work? And then you start writing it while you're recording it and like editing it. And then when it works in audio format, then it's like, cool, this is the best possible showcase of what the movie will be, or at least sound like, much better than a screenplay. And then you do that and you get on a microphone, you talk about it. And then Steve Coogan or like, Bong Joon-ho reaches out and they're like, yeah, we've been doing this for years. And like, you hear stories about Hitchcock or Peter Jackson doing the same thing. It just doesn't really get widely talked about. I had never heard of anybody doing it beforehand. Yeah. I suggest everybody do it, because the last thing that you want is to have all of the motor car of, or the train of money going. And then only when you show up on set, do you realize the movie might suck. And doing it in audio form, podcast form, is incredibly valuable to a filmmaker. Even if you never release it, it gives you an idea of how it's working and how it's not.
Yeah. I just think for me, like too, like it's almost like that next step towards actualization in a way.
Yeah.
Because like it's one thing to sort of write something, but then it lives on your computer or whatever it is.
It's so depressing. Yeah.
And you just kind of stare at it and you're like, oh, okay. And then to give it some life and to make it feel like it's a real thing, like, you know what I mean? That could like really come together. Like, I feel like that might be a little empowering for filmmakers just to be
it's amazing. It's amazing. And then it's funny. We're like, also I'm very lucky that I'm an actor, or I have a voice I pretend to be an actor. And so like, I can do the voices and make it work and have it sound good, like an audiobook or something. But I talk to some people and they're like, well, I'm not an actor. And then some people will say, I don't want to record it as a podcast because what if it sucks? And then I have to kind of remind them that if it sucks as a podcast, it might suck as a movie. Like it's very important. This is just the audio of the movie, and that shouldn't suck. There's just like an auditory storytelling of the movie. And if you can do it once for free in a closet with a laptop or the voice memo app on your iPhone, you should do it. It is incredibly enlightening. And exactly, you said like it's encouraging. If it's working, you get to share that with your friends and go, think about this for this scene, and they can hear it instead of giving you notes on a screenplay, which I always hate and isn't a good example of what the movie's going to be.
Yeah, no, definitely. And also I wanted to ask for like the beta test too, because what I really enjoyed about that was like, one, it made me kind of think about a lot of different things that I just really hadn't thought about in terms of how people really are on the internet and how, that sort of spills over to our real lives and things like that. But I'm curious for you, like, there's things about that movie that seem particularly challenging in ways that Thunder Road and Wolf of Snow Hollow weren't. And I'm curious, was that...
You're talking about the face sitting scene.
Sure. But in terms of like, because there's such an interesting tone to get right in that movie, because like you're dealing with some, potentially heavy things, but also there is sort of this ripple of dark comedy going through everything. And like, was that just...
Oh, it's brutal. Oh, it's terrible. And it's also like, we're going to make a movie about the WGA packaging fight, but with agencies, and everybody might hate us. Every agent in town might hate us, but their clients will probably love us. So you have that thing that's keeping you awake at night of like, oh, I don't want to be rude to people. I hope nobody, it hurts my career or whatever that fear is. And then we're also making something that's a horror movie that is supposed to be a comedy about Hollywood to like kind of give the power back to the people. And then you open the movie with a 5-minute scene in Swedish. And it's like, well, where the fuck are we going with this thing? Like what is this movie? And I love it. I think it's like the most cinematic movie I've ever made. And I stand by it so much. It's like, there's so much that is going on. It is undeniably interesting. And it's an homage to David Fincher and Ruben Östlund and Dario Argento and, Hitchcock, all of my favorite people. And I don't know, I feel like Bong Joon-ho certainly, doing the genre fluidity thing is an amazing thing. And, it's supposed to be self-sacrifice. You're supposed to, every movie's supposed to almost kill you, I think.
and we love it for it. You know what I mean? Well, you kind of touched on something I wanted to ask. Like, so, the movie came out, and I know you guys are going to be on Blu-ray and DVD next month and everything like that.
That's right.
Did you face any actual backlash from people, or were people pretty receptive? Like, because I feel like, honestly, like I don't take myself too seriously as a writer, because I know what I'm doing isn't like in the grand scheme of things super important or anything like that. So if like people want to like, poke fun at things that I write or things like that, whatever, it's fine. If you can't, find a little humor in the things that you do in life, then, you need to not be so serious. Like, I'm curious, like, was anybody actually up in arms, or did you find like people were pretty receptive?
No, people were up in arms. I mean,
really? Okay.
Well, we had 11 different assistants, agents, ex-agents, and ex-assistants break their NDAs to talk to us about what it was like on the inside of these agencies, the top 4 agencies in Hollywood, arguably 5, about what it was like during this fight with the Writers Guild of America West, and how much stress there was, and how they couldn't they couldn't talk about how stressed they were. They were worried that the entire house of cards is going to collapse around them. And there's a bunch of honor among thieves, and the agencies were all talking to each other and trying to screw over the workers. An ongoing thing that's happening in this industry, most industries. So we had a bunch of emails, and we were kind of a liability at that point. And some of that made it into the script of the movie and in Easter eggs throughout the movie and stuff. So we did have some backlash. I got dropped from my agency. I don't blame anybody. They said, "We hear you loud and clear. We're going to be cheering you on from the sidelines." And I felt really shitty about it for about 48 hours. I felt like I got in trouble and I had to go to the principal's office. And then Christopher Nolan reached out and asked me to come in to audition for Oppenheimer. I didn't get the part, but that was kind of a reminder that if you can just do something and put it out into the world, those who know don't care, and those who care don't know. And that was a really wonderful confirmation that, like, although we had gotten in trouble, the people with a fucking sense of humor in this town really liked it.
Wow. I'm really sorry to hear that.
Don't be. I'm rep now at UTA.
Okay.
When I got dropped, I talked to Ellen Lewis, who's a very famous casting director, and a couple other big casting directors. And I said, what agent do you love? Who's honest and who's lovely, and who's a real person? And out of the 5 casting directors I asked, on all of their lists was Houston Costa, who is my agent now at UTA. He's a very lovely, kind person, and I couldn't be happier. So it all ended up being okay.
Okay, good. Because and that's the thing. It's like, it's one of those where you're like, it's just a movie and blah, blah, blah. But you realize, like,
not to them. These people notoriously don't have a sense of humor. And they can't. It's such a toxic mindset. I suggest everybody go see the beta test to see what we're talking about if you haven't seen it. But it really is a kind of dog eat dog, least said, soonest mended thing, which is why Harvey was allowed to keep up with everything as long as he did. The power dynamics are completely against the assistants and anybody from speaking honestly about how they feel about stuff. It is a crazy world to live in. And we got the stuff that we had to cut from the movie or from the script because it was too ridiculous, but truthful is really insane. I really did enjoy talking to these people about the hell that it is working at an agency.
Well, and I think also, too, there's a lot of folks who have worked at that level, whether it's in the traditional sort of agency system or just in the peripherals of Hollywood, that really got that. Because I'll tell you, when I first moved out here, I was an assistant at a special effects shop, which, is pretty cool because you're getting to be around monsters and stuff like that. But and I say this because he unfortunately passed away last year, so it's not like he's going to yell at me or anything like that. But it was one of the toughest jobs I ever had in my entire life. Because
same with me. I was at Industrial Light and Magic. I was a production assistant in San Francisco.
Oh, wow.
For 11 months. Yeah, same thing.
Oh, yeah. And it's like dealing with like all of the things with him, but then also studios and other producers and directors and actors who coming in for life casts. But then they're like, I don't want to shave my face. And you're trying to talk to them for 20 minutes about, no, you're going to really need to do this. And they're just like, I don't want to do this. And it's like the things that you have to do and you have to jump through. And at the end of every day, we're like, you just want to burst into tears because you're like, I don't feel like I've done anything remotely well, but I'm still here. And it's like, you just go home feeling sort of defeated every single day of your life. You're just like, I really related to that because the assistant of that was just like,
Jacqueline.
I loved her. I was like, I get you, girl. Like, I know what you're living through right now. And I totally get it.
That's the majority of the emails and the outreach that we've gotten. We have had more people reach out with more documents from different agencies since we released the movie, but all of them have been Jacqueline's. They've all been people who are beaten down and say, I'm so sorry and thank you for representing me. But then also people who have not been in the film industry for 20 years and they reach out and say, that was my experience. Thank you for making this movie. I'll never move back to Los Angeles. It's crazy. It's crazy how toxic that world can be.
It's a bummer. And for me, like, I guess I'm sort of an optimist where I kind of hoped like maybe like in some way it could have been like a catalyst where like people realize like, oh, maybe we don't need to be this shitty to everybody. And, maybe we're all just in this fight because we love movies or we love entertainment and we want, people to succeed or something like that. And it's a bummer that like, oh no, the people just got really pissed off because they are so in their own little bubble that they just can't understand when they've screwed up or that they're being toxic, which is,
somebody saw Entourage at the fraternity house and thought, oh, my parents have money. I can go and do this. This is good. We're going to be this cool forever and nothing will change. It's 2001. This should work out. Yeah. Ridiculous.
Oh my gosh. I love that you mentioned Entourage, because we were talking about shows before that we would rewatch. I've never seen Entourage, and I don't think I'll ever will watch Entourage. I'll be honest.
Yeah.
I just think it would just get under my skin in ways I wasn't ready for.
There was a line that we had to cut because it was too ridiculous in the beta test. I don't think I've told anybody this out loud, but there was a line that all of my executive producers and producers loved, and they were like, "It's so beautiful, you should keep it in the film." But I say in the movie, I'm crawling along the ground and have a nervous breakdown, and I say, I hate this. I fucking hate the internet. I just want it to be the early 2000s. And then the continuation of that line was, I want to crawl inside of the Entourage box set and fall asleep. And then I have this freak out, and everybody was like, "That's so much fun. You got to put it in." I was like, "No, that's like Will Ferrell. That's like way too much. Let's not do that." Maybe I'll release that sometime later. Who knows?
I think you should. I wanted to ask, before I kind of go to sort of my final indie questions. But for me, one of my favorite surprises of last year, and you kind of talked about this a little bit, but was your appearance in Halloween Kills.
Yeah.
Because first of all,
I didn't tell anybody.
I know. And I the first time I'm watching it, because I think I watched it at home. No. Oh, that's what it was. They did the screening through Beyond Fest. Yeah. And I'm sitting there in my other half. He's sort of okay with faces and names. And I literally the opening of the movie happens, and then there you are. And I was like, oh, I gasped.
The Leonardo DiCaprio gif from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, him snapping at the TV, being like, "Oh, that's it, it's Jim. Oh my God, I know that guy."
I was like, holy shit. And then so after, because he's looking at me like, what? And I didn't want to talk because I'm watching a movie, And so as soon as it finished, David Gordon Green's coming up to do his talk or whatever. And Brian looks up at me, he's like, "What?" He's like, "What was going on?" And I was like, "That's Jim Cummings." And I was like, "Snow Hollow guy." And he was
guy.
Oh, because he came with me to see it when we saw The Burbs, because that's a huge movie for him as well. And he was like, "Oh shit." He was like, "That's awesome." And so was that just David Gordon Green called you up and it was like, "Hey, do you want to come out and do this scene?"
You're joking. It's literally that. That is exactly what happened. So amazing. David and I have been pen pals for a while because I'm from New Orleans, and I don't know how I got in touch with him. I got in touch with him through a filmmaker. There's an editor at the time, it's Filmmaker now. And I said, I was like, all the real girls, the reason I got into making movies, because kids from the South can make movies. And that was an inspiration for me. I was like, maybe I can do it. And then he saw the Thunder Road short. I think David McBride sent it to him. And then I sent him the feature, and he was incredibly kind and gave notes before we picture locked, which is awesome. Can't believe that happened. And then he saw Thunder Road again on an airplane when they were casting for Halloween Kills. I think he was flying out to Wilmington, and he called me, I think when he landed, and was like, "Hey man, you want to come out to Wilmington and shoot the scene? I think it'd be good. I think you play this guy named Officer McCabe. It could be fun." And I was like, "All right, do I have to go through casting? You want me to audition?" He's like, "No, man, just I'll talk to the Blumhouse people and come on now, it'll be fun." And I made him sound like Bing Crosby right there. He doesn't sound like Bing Crosby, but I went out. I was there for a week, and it was amazing. It was in early October. It was around my birthday. Halloween is actually my birthday. And it was amazing. I got to hang out with Thomas Mann and David Green and just see him work. And he is a live wire and just the nicest, most zen, hilarious Southern dude. It was really a dream come true. There was a moment when he's directing young Lonnie in the street, and it's looks like Halloween. We're in a real neighborhood. It's hot out. He's wearing a tank top and cut off jean shorts and cowboy boots. And he's running around, and I hung out with him for 3 or 4 days. And I was like, "Man, it's hot. I'm gonna get him some water. Maybe David needs some water. Man, I'll get him a bottle of water." I got him a bottle of water. And I'm sitting there in the dark, and the spotlight's on young Lonnie, and David's running around directing the scene. And I said, "Oh man, that's so cool. It's David's making this movie." And I looked at him and I was like, "No, that's not my buddy David. That's the guy that made All the Real Girls." And I started crying. And I was sitting there in the dark watching this guy, the reason I got to make movies. And I was like, that's my buddy. No, that's not my buddy. This other guy. I was like, that is a crazy thing that I felt like I had made it then, of like sitting in this cop's uniform with blood all over me, watching a good buddy of mine make his movie. It was so incredible to make that movie with that team.
That's awesome. And he's, and again, he's a guy who also has like some really strong roots in indie filmmaking.
Yeah.
Because I love that you mentioned all the real girls, because I remember seeing that.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah. And it's funny. I went through a Josh Lucas phase for a while in the early 2000s. So I remember seeing Undertow. I rented it, like blind rented it at like,
oh, no way.
Family Video way back in the day, because I was like, oh, Josh Lucas. I don't know what I was thinking. I'm sure he's a lovely gentleman, but I've never heard of somebody going through a Josh Lucas phase before. Yeah. So, but I remember the reviews on that were sort of mixed, but there was something about that just really stuck with me. Yeah. And I remember, like when Your Highness came, I was like, wait, this is the guy who did.
Same guy? Like, it's so crazy. And then the fact that he does Eastbound and Down, like, I think that is such an admirable career to do the high art stuff of like the Sundance winning stuff and Snow Angels and these like beautiful works of art. And then to also do like, the Pineapple Expresses and like all kinds of weird shit with your buddies who you made throughout the years. Like, I think it was like 2 days, maybe the day that they were supposed to start shooting on All the Real Girls, the actor dropped out, and Danny McBride, who was a coordinating producer, like a production assistant on the movie, was like, I'll do it. All right, Danny, you get in and act. And that's the beginning of Danny McBride's acting career. And it's so funny that he inspired a generation of filmmakers. Apparently Danny was the best director in North Carolina at the time, and they were all looking up to him. And now he's like a far more famous actor. But that whole team inspired a generation of people, particularly in the South, for me, to get off the couch and make something. And it's really amazing to see how many movies they've made and how, diverse and crazy they are.
Yeah. Danny McBride to me is really fascinating because he seems like a guy who would be one way, right? But he's like so versatile, like it's always the things that you're not expecting him to show up in, or not the performance you're expecting, or him writing Halloween movies is never something I would have expected to be embracing 10 years ago. Yeah. But to me is really fascinating because of just like how he's been able to sort of carve out this really unusual path in Hollywood for himself.
Yeah, they do a good job and they work hard. It's him, it's David Gordon Green and Scott Teems, who did, he was the writer and director of That Evening Sun and a bunch of other good movies, but it is very Southern. And I would never think of a reboot of Halloween to like function in the South, but it really does. It gives it this kind of like Gothic feel and, I don't know, authenticity, this kind of like aesthetic to it. Like all the characters feel like they're real people. And it's also kind of like stoner a bit, which is what the original is. The original still feels like it's kind of a stoner kid slasher thing, and they do that stuff well.
Definitely. Well, I wanted to ask you because, you are somebody who has been able to sort of navigate the independent, filmmaking world and sort of do it on your own terms. Like, are you feeling, in terms of, you mentioned like, you're looking towards your next project and things like that. Do you feel like this is where you want to be? Like, is there a desire to kind of go big and go studio, or do you want to stay in this realm? Do you feel like there's more control and you just kind of get to tell the stories that you want to make over here versus going into that system and having to deal with the, filmmaking by committee and things like that?
I mean, honestly, nobody's asked me. Like you're the first. I mean, like I would love, PJ and I wrote a movie that's probably the best thing we'll ever write. We researched it for 2 years. It's our Victorian horror movie that we wrote basically for Eddie Izzard. And it's great. And we're going out with it now and hopefully people will say yes to it. But it's a period piece. I have no daydreams that we'd be able to raise the money independently. It would have to be a bigger film with movie stars and everything. But that one, I think, deserves it. I think that one is the one where, like, if I have to make it before I die, it feels like, so it should be done properly. Still with friends and still, in the way that we like to make and finish movies. But I think it would have to be bigger. So I don't know. I think even now, I was talking to my buddy Pam Robinson, who's over shooting a commercial the other week. And I said, yeah, I'm struggling. I don't know. It's difficult to get people to take us seriously. And she said, even you, it's hard for you. And I was like, yeah, I'm a nobody. Like, what do you think? Like, I think there's this misconception that like you make a couple of movies and people are knocking down your door. And really, you only eat what you kill. You only eat what you hunt in this world. You kind of have to go out and do it yourself a bit. I think the landscape has changed a decent amount. I'd still love to make movies the way that we have been, of making friends on the internet who want to support us. And those are always in the black. We end up paying all of our investors back and then some. I really do feel a lot of fulfillment doing that. But I guess I'm just going to have to keep doing that until somebody comes along and takes us more seriously.
I feel like we need to have a discussion with you and like Blumhouse or somebody, like, to get.
I like those
because
guys.
because well, the one thing that I appreciate about Blumhouse is, one, they started out very indie, in terms of the stuff that they were doing, and now there's sort of this really great liaison with studios where they're still working with directors, who typically wouldn't get a shot with the studios, like somebody like Jordan Peele making a horror movie. How many years ago now, like, that was unheard of. And now he's like a master of horror. And that's all thanks to Jason Blum realizing like that this kid had a vision, and like, let's give him some money and let him go out and make his movie, so they're really fascinating to me, because I think, they are working with like Paramount and Universal and Amazon for their, other movies and things like that. But they're very indie in their roots, in terms of how they still approach things and, approach budgets and all that kind of stuff, and supporting filmmakers too.
It's wild. I went to Blumhouse twice in my life, their offices in Los Angeles. And for those who haven't been, when I was there, it was like, this is before the pandemic, there's like a bunch of people hanging out in the hallway on laptops, editing and doing assistant editing. So it was like incredibly indie, where they were working on 7 features at any given time, maybe more. And like, there was people who didn't have offices that were just like in the hallway editing stuff to make sure that they were making their deadlines. And it was such a fun environment to be in, just like tag team, going between different rooms and seeing what people were working on. They're doing sound design in one room, they're doing color and visual effects in another room. It was like such a vibrant film studio. It felt like kind of what film studios used to be like back in the day. And they carry that into production as well. They'll let you kind of do what you want to an extent, so long as it's delivering the goods.
Yeah, no, it's interesting to me. And, it's one of those where I'm like, I will still always go out and see a Blumhouse movie, regardless of the movies. Like, if I watch her, I'm like, I don't know about that. But like, I'll still go, only because like, I know the people behind it, and I know what their impetus is like in terms of wanting to deliver for fans. And I have to, like, I will always respect that. Like,
they're really cool. They've taken me pretty seriously. They've like, I've had a couple of times where they'll call me on my cell phone, and actually on that same drive with the U-Haul, where I was helping out the kids at Sundance, I got a call from the heads at Blumhouse asking about a movie, and they had seen beta test and really loved it. And it's funny. They're just very open people that are always trying to make something cool. And I like that team a lot.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious, for you, as we sort of wrap this up, because you are somebody who sort of, had sort of this trial by fire, you kind of got into this and, sort of navigated your way through a lot of different, waters, so to speak.
So far. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm just curious, is there any sort of advice that you would give aspiring filmmakers that maybe nobody told you coming into this, that you feel like is really crucial?
That Mark Duplass 2015 South by Southwest speech is pretty good. I think maybe it's 2013. His keynote, where he says the cavalry isn't coming. He goes into so much more detail than anything I could cover on this. But really, all of everything that you think might be bullshit in the film industry probably is, and you are going to have to do it all yourself. So like, eventually people come along and help you. But I always say, start small, start in shorts. Make a bunch of shorts until one clicks, until one is incredible. Constantly try to impress your heroes, not your constituents, not the people around you or the kids you went to school with. Make something and submit it to film festivals, and keep doing it until you have your break, and it comes. if you focus on the right stuff and impressing an audience and having a thorough conversation with your audience through cinema, as best you can, something will click and you'll be fine.
Awesome. Yeah. I think so many people sort of overlook shorts because I think there's sort of this tendency to think that they're a waste of time. But I think of like, in terms of like the last 15 to 20 years, how many careers were made because of short films?
Yeah, Napoleon Dynamite was a short. Saw was a short.
Yep. David Sandberg's
Whiplash,
Lights Out was a short also.
Lights Out was a short. Yeah, I mean, going from short to feature is an incredibly well-proven path. We run a lab every year. We just opened up submissions today, but it's called the Short to Feature Lab, and it's all pro bono. It's completely it's completely pro bono. We don't take it. It's all for the filmmakers, completely philanthropic. But we bring people out from all over the world and help them workshop their features from short to feature, and then help them on connecting them with people that might be able to finance or crowdfunding or something like that. And it is incredibly valuable. We've had about 5 filmmakers go from short to feature, and all the films have done well. They've won Austin Film Festival. They've had releases around the world. It's like a very viable way to do it. And there's so many people that went to school with these same kids that are jealous. And it's like, there was nothing important about the lab. It's just like, I got encouragement to go and do it. And I didn't sit around and left my script being a PDF on my desktop. It's like, I made stuff that sometimes was shot on a cell phone and, did some proof of concept stuff until we could run a Kickstarter campaign to get the camera that I wanted. Like you just have to kind of grow slowly, and starting in shorts is, the foundation of my career.
Yeah. Where, like, just for those who are listening, where can they find out more information on this?
It's at shorttofeature.com. But if you just Google the Short to Feature Lab, I'm sure you'll find it.
Okay, cool. Just because in case anybody who's listening would be interested in that, I want to make sure I can point them in the right direction.
And Jim, I can guarantee you I watch every short. So if they submit to the lab, my eyes and my brain will process their short film. So we don't have any screeners. It's just me. And it's really cool.
That is really cool. Makes me, now I'm like, gosh, I wish I was a filmmaker because it's just nice to have those kind of resources.
It's never too late. It's never too late.
I made one short film in 2011 and I was like, I'm good. It was about I have a cardboard cutout of The Rock and it kills people. So
cool.
It's good. I'm good after that. So yeah, no, it was
ending on a high note.
Yeah.
You did your masterpiece. You don't have to do it anymore. Yeah.
I was like, now that I've conquered the world, there's nothing left for me to do. Yeah, no, it was just one of those, because it was always around my house and always scaring the crap out of people. And I was like, well, what if we made a horror movie about that?
That's fun.
So, and he still, hangs out. But yeah, Jim, this was really, really amazing. I don't want to keep you too much longer because I've been picking your brain for over an hour now. But truly, it's been so fun to watch your career over, the last few years. And I'm just, whenever you're involved with something, I just get really happy about that because I know that we're going to see something that isn't like everything else, if that makes sense. And I feel like I'm underplaying how much I enjoy it.
That is so important to me. I'm so glad that you said that. It's like, if our work is synonymous with something weird and different and big, that is the best compliment I've ever gotten. I hope that that's on my tombstone.
Yes. Well, and honestly, I'm also just kind of hanging around waiting for the next time that you'll dance in a movie because I feel like we just haven't had enough of that after.
I'd love that. I would love that. I'd love to do a dance movie. It's like, I miss Bollywood. I would love to do something like that.
Speaking of, I don't know if I'm saying it right, but have you seen RRR?
I have not. It's on my Letterboxd watch list. It's supposed to be amazing. Have you seen it?
I haven't yet. I've been trying to get out, but it was I just got inundated with current movies coming out that I had to kind of cover, like the Massive Talent and The Northman and things like that. So that's on my to watch list because everybody has just been talking about it. So I was curious if that was one.
It's supposed to be really good. Now I'm going to add that. I'm going to boost that up on my queue. I'm going to watch that now. I'm getting a projector tonight in the garage, so maybe that'll be the first, the maiden voyage of the garage cinema tonight. Maybe I'll watch RRR.
Excellent. But Jim, again, thank you so much for doing this. And for those of you listening, thank you so much for supporting Corpse Club. You can find out more about us over at corpseclub.com. You can get all your daily news reviews, interviews, and of course, all of our Indie Horror Month coverage over at dailydead.com. And you can follow us over at Daily Dead News on Twitter. And Jim, where can people find you on social media, just so that way they can keep up with everything you've got going on?
I'm just at Jimmy C. That's me. It's Twitter and Instagram. Those are the two of the best places. And then Reddit as well, but mainly Twitter. Jimmy C. That's me.
Okay, awesome. But again, thank you so much for doing this, Jimmy. Jimmy. See, now I'm going to call you Jimmy.
Either or, that's fine. My mom calls me Jimmy. That's fine.
But again, thank you for doing this. And of course, everybody, for those of you listening, thanks for all your support. And until next time, everybody, stay scary.